What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining me on another FCP Euro DIY. Today we are working on a 2020 BMW 330i xDrive. Today on the G20 chassis behind me, we are going to be covering how to replace your tie rods. Whether you have an all-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive model, the process should be the same. In front of us, we have a set of new tie rods and a set of new bellows, which are both sold separately. We have genuine and M440i available on fcpero.com. If you're going with the genuine, just note that you will have to get the locking nut for the ball joint end separately, as BMW does not include those, unlike M440i, which includes all the hardware needed. This should be a pretty straightforward job. Typically, these can last you anywhere from 60 to 100K. Think about it like a normal control arm. However, every single time you get in the car, these are always putting in work. Every time you touch the steering wheel and put any sort of input in, these are doing something. So these are a heavy wear item when it comes to front end suspension and steering. Another thing that can happen is while the ball joint may not be bad on your car, depending on where you live, there may be rust on the threads. And with time, these threads can corrode inside of the tie rod end, prohibiting it from being aligned down the road. So if you ever go to a shop and we can't do an alignment, your tie rods are frozen, what they mean is that the inner and the outer are quite literally welded together due to rust, making it unable for them to make adjustments, which may be another reason why you want to replace them. We'll show you a quick tip on how to avoid that for the future with some good ceramic paste later on. But before we get into that, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this DIY. For this DIY, you're going to need a couple tools. A lot of these are a little bit repetitive, and there's a couple different ways to go about it depending on what you have at home. You can use something like a tie rod tool, which has a deep tube. I'll show you really quickly. This is just a generic one. We have a Lyle one that we offer as well. It's a long tube, and you can put different fittings in it depending on the size of your inner tie rod. 36 mil is the size for the G20, what we're going to be working with. So you can go about it this way. You've seen us use this tool on the channel many different times. We can also just use a 36 mil wrench, which is what we're going to do for today's sake. But again, just a couple different ways of going about it. If you're really desperate or you don't have either one of those, but you have some nice adjustables, something like these Nipeks, as long as they get big enough to grab the head of the inner tie rod, will also do the trick. We have some calipers here just to measure the length on our old units so that we can kind of get them kind of close for the new ones that we're going to be installing so that we can get it to the alignment shop. Obviously, it goes without saying, you're going to need an alignment whenever you replace tie rods or really any major front end components. We have a large 1/2-inch torque wrench, a 3/8 drive ratchet. Again, the 36 mil wrench. We have two different 21s. We have a 13 mil wrench. We have some Automotive pliers, some regular pliers. As far as sockets go, we have a 21 mil socket. We have a 17 in 8 mil, T50 and a T40. We have a flathead screwdriver. We have some torque seal, a little bit of dielectric grease. We have a cutting wheel. Oftentimes, especially in New England and any rust belt areas, these tie rods can be seized. And I'm going to suspect that there's a chance that we need to cut some things off of here. So again, we'll do our best to avoid doing that first, but there's more oftentimes than not, I end up cutting these things off. So we're going to be prepared. We have an electric ratchet, an electric impact gun, some penetrating fluid, and some liquid moly ceramic paste. This is going to be the trick to not having to cut your tie rods off next time and extending the adjustability of them in the future. Like always with a DIY like this, watch it all the way through. If you're looking for tools, we may add or remove things throughout the job. And now with that, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be working on the passenger side. We have 5 17mm lug bolts to remove. All right, with the wheel off, we can see a little bit better what we're doing. We have some fender liner ridge, some fender liner bits to remove. So let's go ahead and continue on with that. For this middle piece right here, we have 3 8mm bolts. We have one on this front half, one on the back half, and one underneath. Let's do this front one first. All right, as we continue on working, you may see that some things change or some other parts change, and that's because we're filming a couple DIYs at the same time. So just something to keep in mind that we have available, but don't be alarmed if you're like, that's different, or that's not new, or that's missing during this DIY, just because we're doing a couple of videos at once. All right, With that, that's going to give us all the access we need to get to the inner boot for the tie rod assembly and be able to get the old one out and the new one in. But before we work on that, we have a couple things to do on this end here on the outer tie rod. So let's get a little bit closer and work on that next. Next, we're going to free up our pinch bolt. This is a T50. We're going to free it up and remove it all the way, mainly because we are replacing this whole assembly. So the new one comes with a fresh bolt. We don't need to retain this one at all. I just want it fully out so it doesn't hinder us from separating the inner from the outer for the removal process. Another thing we're going to look at now before we get too carried away is how you can kind of use what's already on the car to set up your eyeball alignment when you install everything. One thing you can do is count the number of threads that are exposed. So we have 1, 2, 3, almost 4 flush with the outer tie rod. The other thing you can do is take your caliper, like we mentioned before, and use a set point that you can measure from again later on. So for example, for us, we would do maybe something like the end of the outer tie rod and maybe where this beveled edge is on the inner tie rod. So let's just assume 30 millimeters will get us close when we put the new stuff back in. Again, this is just so that the car isn't tracking horribly when you go over to the alignment shop. With that, I like to take a flathead and just open up this pinch a little bit to try and give us a better chance at freeing these two ends up. These are typically where your tie rods are going to freeze and they're going to become non-adjustable or unable to be adjusted. So if you ever go in for an alignment and they're frozen, we can't adjust them, it's usually right here. And it's usually where you want to hit it with penetrating fluid if you can. Full disclosure, I did the other side and the other side was completely frozen. Let it sit with some coil for about 10 minutes, never came undone. So you can go about this two ways. You can cut it or you can hit it with heat and try to save it that way. But again, we're replacing the whole thing, so I'm not looking at saving anything. I just want to get it removed. So we're gonna just have to cut it. So we'll go ahead and do that now, and then we'll work on freeing up the outer end and then working our way to the inner. So we grab a safety shield, cut that baby free, and go from there. All right, now we have our inner tie rod separated from our outer tie rod. Let's get this outer piece out. Now we're gonna work on freeing up our 21 millimeter nut up here. First, we're just gonna break it free, then we'll worry about counter holding everything. So in this case, the standard wrench is gonna be a better fit. Sometimes it's helpful to have someone counter hold for you the whole steering situation on the other wheel. So if you have a second set of hands, that will be helpful. In this case, we've already cut this, so we're just gonna max this out, but not a bad idea to break it free before you get to this point. All right, now we have that free. Let's get a little bit more eye level with it. We'll show you how to counter hold it and get this out the rest of the way. Again, unlike the older generation cars, E90s, E60s, E46s, E36s, these aren't the same tapered joints where you could put some weight underneath them to keep the tapered end locked and keeping the nut from spinning. Unfortunately, these have a different seat that sit into these spindles, which make them really easy as far as dropping them in and out. You don't have to fight them, but you do always have to run a counter hold tool to free them up and snug them up. So something to keep in mind. All right, let's get this inner tie rod out next. Next, we're gonna take our pliers and just remove this pinch clamp on the end. That's gonna free up the outer end of our boot. And now we're gonna take our flathead screwdriver and work that Automotive clamp open. For those of you that may be curious, the size on these factory clamps is a 66.5, I believe. Let's double check. Yeah, these are a 66.5. So if for some reason you mess up the first go, these are available on their own on fcpr.com. So if you're looking to just reuse your bellows, you can do that as well. As long as these don't have any holes on them, in them, there's no reason you can't reuse them. And pull this baby out. All right, and here is our inner tie rod. If your rack has any sort of rust or anything funky going on in here, then typically that's a sign to replace them. This one's in great shape, plenty of goo and grease in there. That's what we want to see. So now what I like to do is I like to turn the opposite wheel away from where we're working so that this end is as close as possible to the rack itself, while still giving me a chance to get my wrench or tie rod tool on it. That's gonna put less strain on this rack that's hanging out here. There is a special BMW tool that they use hopefully use in the dealerships, that they may use in the dealerships to counterhold the rack so you're not putting too much load on it. Again, just reducing how much of it is hanging out is gonna help with that. So let me move that driver's side wheel over a bit. I'll show you what I mean. We'll get this close, probably about here, and then we'll break that free with a 36. Before we go ahead and throw the inner end, we're gonna clean up the outer edge of our steering rack. From the factory, these have a little bit of grease. It helps seal the elements out when you have your boot and clamp in place. If there's any openings or maybe the car sees a bit of deep water, hopefully the bit of grease in between the boot and the rack will help keep this clean. So we're gonna wipe off this old dry stuff. This is what we're gonna use our dielectric grease for. We're just gonna run a nice little slather of it on the outside. It'll also help seat the boot when we assemble everything. All right, we're gonna poke that end out of the inner tie rod once more by turning our opposite wheel here that we're working with. So driver's side in this case. Torque spec for this is 110 Newton meters. You would need a large crow's foot or one of those universal tools like the one that we covered at the beginning, if you want to set that accurately, or you can just snug this up until it stops. You'll notice that it's not a lot of power that is needed to remove it. So for reference, almost roughly what you would be doing for some of the control arm hardware, if you've done that in the past on the same car, is about the same torque spec that you're going to be putting into this inner tie rod. So we're just going to snug this up, and that's going to be good. Now we're going to draw it all the way back in, and that's going to make installing the boot a lot easier. You want to apply a little bit of grease to the inner tie rod right here, right past this little channel here. The end of your boot is going to live right here. So the little bit of grease here again will help seal out the elements, but will also allow the boot to not bind up when this is being rotated for when the alignment is set. This will be good right here. Again, I'm just using the electric grease for this. We're going to feed our clamp onto our boot and then slide everything in as a whole, making sure that we go evenly over the end of the rack. With that, I'm going to straighten out the wheel a little bit more on the driver's side. Once again, you can see how much this comes out. This is with it being, straight. So hitting this the whole time, threading it into the rack would have been a bit annoying. We can pull this back, and you can see it. This ridge here on the boot likes to live in that little channel right there. So once you're there, you know you're good. Now we can take our new clamp and put that in. Now with the inner tie rod all situated, we're going to make it so that these don't freeze up on us again. And that is going to be with this liquid moly paste. We're going to coat these threads here on the inside. And if you want to be extra about it, you can apply some to the inside of the outer tie rod as well. Now we're simply going to thread this baby on. That'll be 1, 2, 3, 4 threads exposed. And then just for measuring sake, we can put the caliper on it. See what that looks like. All right, so almost 30. So again, just trying to keep it nice and close so that the car's not totally far off when you drive it to an alignment shop. On top of that, when you have everything back together and your wheel is straight, if you see that one wheel is obviously pointing in one direction and the other one's in the other direction, drive that 13, loosen up the T50, and just set them a little bit better before you hit the road. Okay, with that, we're gonna leave this T50 loose for now. We're gonna get our ball joint back in and then get this nut snugged up. Torque spec for this 21 mil is going to be 165 Newton meters. Now we'll go ahead and mark this down. And then once you're happy with your eyeball alignment, the T50 gets snugged down to 32 Newton meters. Because this car is going straight to the shop down the road right after we're done for the alignment, we're just going to snug this up, as this is going to be the first thing that they're going to break free to set the car alignment. So not too worried about the torque spec on it, as it's going to be completely undone, but at least we'll snug it up so it's not all over the road while it gets there. All right, with that, our tie rod is officially in. Again, the same process on the driver's side. We're gonna get our little bit of fender liner back in with the 3/8 mils, get the wheel on, get it on the ground, and torque them up. So let's do that next. All right, we have one cover left to throw on here. This is gonna be the little in-between piece of the two halves of fender liners. As we throw this in, we just wanna make sure we have it in the same position that we had it when we took it out. Gonna go behind our soft line. So make sure you don't pinch that in there. Not that it's gonna damage the line, but it'll look improper. All right, with that, we have the car completely buttoned up. At this point, we're gonna throw the wheel back on, make sure it's flush by snugging the bolts in a crisscross pattern. Then from there, we'll lower the car down, torque the wheels in a crisscross pattern to 140 Newton meters with the 17mm socket. And that is going to conclude today's DIY, my good people. From there, take your car to go get an alignment, and it should feel a lot better, especially if you had an old alignment and or a loose steering wheel feel. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, leave those in the comment section below. And if you like this DIY and you'd like to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.